Yeah, 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 that doesn't matter. Now, get it done. Get it done by 1 o'clock this afternoon. No, no, get it done. Um, Look, I gotta go. Got to do episode number 297 of the Gratu Orloff Show in color. Um, yeah, get it done. Sorry. This is the great Gratu Orloff. Here, episode 297 of the Gratu Orloff Show in color here on the Gratu Orloff Network 24 hours a day. We're up in room 3 of floor 7 of the Gratu Orloff building. And we're here because we've just survived an existential crisis here in the Gratu Orloff building. Gratu and his wife and dog and 2 cats almost froze to death due to incompetence and the decision made to turn off the electricity to the Gratu Orloff building for 24 hours during frigid weather, ice and snow, single-digit temperatures. The temperature plunged here in the Gratu Orloff building until we almost experienced hypothermia. Unacceptable. Then they tried turning off the water to Gratu Orloff and the Wi-Fi. We survived by watching Christopher Lee Hammer Dracula movies and King Kong. Yeah, and we watched Horror of Dracula, Taste the Blood of Dracula. What was the other one? We watched Kiss of the Vampire. And here's another one. Taste the Blood of Dracula. Oh, Dracula is risen from the grave. We're about to watch Dracula AD 1972 because my wife's seen stills from that, and she loves the hairstyle of this protagonist in it, this blonde. She wants to do her hair like that, so she's been seeing these stills from that movie for years, wanting to see it. Oh, I showed her King Kong too, the real King Kong, the 1933 King Kong. She loved it. Anyone that actually watches the 1933 King Kong loves it. You cannot watch the 1933 King Kong and not love it unless you're not really a human being. I used to show King Kong to my students. I would show them King Kong. I would show them Singing in the Rain. I'd show them various movies that I thought were important culturally to our society. To students that had only ever seen Fast and the Furious and Blood In, Blood Out. They only saw movies about gangs or car theft. They only played video games about wrestling or car theft. Not really their fault, it's just all they were exposed to by their older brothers, by their family. But to be a really good writer, which is what I was trying to teach them to be, you have to be exposed to culture. You have to be exposed to good culture. You have to be exposed to good writing. So I would have them read great writing that influenced me when I was a kid. Now the schools have a much more rigid curriculum. You teach this at this time and this story this week. But back then I made my own curriculum. And those students learned and became good writers, and some of them are now teachers and some are in very influential positions. These students that I taught when they were in 6th and 7th grade. And it's kind of important to see King Kong. It's just such a great movie. And if you're an inner city kid that worships wrestling, and then how could you not love the scene where Kong fights the Tyrannosaurus Rex and he's using wrestling moves? And they loved it. Some said, well, it's old, it's black and white. Yeah, it's almost 90 years old. But isn't it amazing? The action never lets up. It's so great. The original King Kong. You know, my first experience with stop motion animation was The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. when I was in second grade in Hampton, Virginia. That came on the movies about 5 o'clock on a Saturday, and I stumbled in and saw the Cyclops, roasting a human being, and it's like, wow. I couldn't believe my eyes. And then all I did was draw pictures of the Cyclops and monsters. It got me even more into monsters than I already was. The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. This was in 1972. The movie had come out, in 58? And then a couple years later, when I'm in fourth grade, there's a sequel called The Golden Voyage of Sinbad. My dad took me to see it, I remember. And it's like weird that a sequel comes out that many years later. But then, a few years pass. I love stop motion animation. Anytime a movie comes on with stop motion animation, that's what I wanted to see. And I still can't accept, CGI, it just looks like a video game. Stop motion animation, that's what I love. Anyway, 70 school year of 76, 77, right? So all this excitement, posters in Dynamite magazine, with this really cool painting of King Kong straddling the two towers of the World Trade Center with a jet in his hand. And I thought, oh boy, this looks great. And I couldn't wait to see this. And they were all the magazines said they had built a giant mechanical ape that acted throughout the movie. That you're going to actually see a life-size gorilla moving in the movie. So it was presented that way in every magazine. It was all lies. Well, my mother took me to see that movie Christmas time of 1976. There were no dinosaurs. The lead protagonist is a hippie-looking guy played by Jeff Bridges. And the Fay Wray character is actually what is her fucking name? Jessica Lange, who later became a great actress, but at that time couldn't act at all. And everyone stated that in all the reviews, and then she took some acting classes and came back and became like an Academy Award-winning actress, but at the time she wasn't ready. And they didn't have any dinosaurs in it. At one point, Kong snapped a rubber snake in half, and he was played by a guy in a suit. It wasn't a stop-motion animated sculpture moving around. And it was so disappointing. Oh, but there was one scene with that mechanical ape that they claimed was going to be in every scene. And it stood up rigid. It was in a cage, right? And then it broke free, and then it lifted its hand like this. For less than maybe 10 seconds, you actually saw this stupid robot that they built. It was very disappointing. But the great thing about that movie coming out, though, that was important, Channel 8, WFAA, the local station, the ABC affiliate here in Grotuville, aired the week before that King Kong remake came out, the original King Kong in prime time, and I saw it. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe how great that was. And at Skaggs Albertsons, which is now at Big Lots, they had a paperback of the novelization of King Kong from the 30s by Edgar, whatever it was, Schoedsack or whatever. I don't remember who wrote it, but it was written. It came out at the time that the movie came out, and it was a paperback version of it. And I still have it as an orange cover. And I later got another edition of it with a Frazetta cover. And I read that, and it was so great. And the other thing is, they started putting out all these books, like The Making of King Kong, and all these magazines, like they do now in magazine stands. They have all these expensive magazines, like about Sean Connery or Bruce Lee, and they're or about the Civil War, and then they're just one-shots. Well, they put out these one-shots about King Kong to cash in on what they thought was going to be a huge movie of the year. Of course, it wasn't. But all the stuff about the original King Kong was so great. They put out a book called The Making of King Kong, and there was another couple of Kong books, trade paperbacks that came out at the time, and I got those, and I was so excited about learning everything I could about the original King Kong. And then I got the Famous Monsters King Kong issue, which had come out in the early 60s, before I was born, and they reprinted it, I don't know, about 72, but I somehow got, I don't know, Lone Star Comics, I got a back issue of that reprinting of the Kong film book. And so the only good thing about that remake of King Kong is it brought back an interest in the original Kong. And this version that we watched on Blu-ray, back then, you know, King Kong came out in 1933. Then they had this Hays Code come in the mid-30s, and then they had to censor movies. It's just like what happened with comic books. You know, in 1955, they brought in the Comics Code Authority, and comics couldn't have vampires and couldn't have the living dead, and the criminals would have to be punished at the end. They'd have to be caught. You couldn't have them get away at the end. Everything, you couldn't have drugs or fountain. You know, everything had to be. And that's what killed EC Comics and a lot of the great horror comics and crime comics, and that's what that little seal was on all the Silver Age and Bronze Age comic books. They don't use it anymore, but anyway, so because there was Senate subcommittee hearings into do comics cause juvenile delinquency, and then ultimately they brought that in to self-censor themselves so they could survive. They wouldn't go out of business. Well, the same thing happened with the film industry in the 30s. In the 20s, in the silent movie era, there were boobs, and there was nudity in some of those old Bible epics, and I know the Sign of the Cross. You had like heads being lopped off, and women being attacked by gorillas, and all kinds of horrible things in the Roman Colosseum there. Anyway, they cleaned everything up. So Betty Boop went from being a flapper to having more conservative clothes. And King Kong came out in 1933. When it was re-released in 36 or 38, they cut a bunch of scenes out of it where Kong's pulling her clothes off and sniffing the clothes, where Kong drops a woman to her death, where Kong's squishing the natives and grinding their heads into the ground and biting into them. Those scenes were all cut out. Well, the guy that was forced to cut those scenes out took those scenes home and saved them. And so in the early 70s, they added those scenes back, and they re-released King Kong in like 1972 and said it's the uncensored King Kong for the first time since the early 30s. But you're watching King Kong, it looks great, and all of a sudden you get to those scenes and they're all dark and scratchy, and you can tell they're from a different source, a 16mm source. Well, apparently recently they found a 35mm print of the complete King Kong from England that had never been cut, and so that's what they're using in this Blu-ray that my wife and I watched. So it plays throughout the whole movie. If you haven't seen King Kong lately, if you've only seen old VHS or DVD, the current Blu-ray that's been around, at least I'm sure I've had that disc 10 years. I had it before I met my wife 8 years ago. But if you're not aware of it, King Kong now looks flawless throughout in the current prints, and it's just such a great experience, and my wife loved it, and she's loving these Hammer movies too. And so but she's got this obsessive compulsive desire to see everything in chronological order, so she wants to start with the very first Hammer movies. And so the first Hammer movies weren't even horror, they were like you see everything in chronological order. It may not and of course I've got this set of 4 Dracula movies, but it doesn't have Scars of Dracula, and it doesn't have Brides of Dracula was the second one, but that doesn't have Christopher Lee, and it doesn't have Dracula Prince of Darkness. Yeah, so we're missing, and I say, well, they're like, you don't really need to see them in order. They're standalone, and so it's like I'm wanting to show her the original Star Trek, She's only seen a couple of episodes I've shown her, but she wants to see it in absolute chronological order. And I said, well, if you want to see it in chronological order, actually, the first episode they showed on television wasn't meant to be the first episode. They kind of showed them in the wrong order because they just thought it would be a good first introduction to King Kong, to Star Trek. And it's like I said, well, Star Trek, the real Star Trek, not the other series, was you could watch an episode in isolation. You really don't. It's not a story like most TV shows now. Like Better Call Saul, you've got to see them in sequence. Each episode was a standalone thing. It's like a Bugs Bunny cartoon. You don't need to see the ones that came before. It makes sense on its own. But she's got this desire to see everything in order. Anyway, so I don't know. King Kong's great. I'd show you comics, but I feel filthy. I feel like my hands are covered with fucking shit. I can't wash my hands because the water coming out of the tap is, they say it's, we got a boil order. It's like we're living in fucking a third world country. So, it's one of those things. I'm going to take a long hot bath as soon as the water's restored. It's going to be great. I just can't wait.
And that was Something's Gotta Give by Bing Crosby. Before we get to our next blast from the past here on
So,
we have a special announcement about
I don't know.
a movie coming out. It's about a cop with his own rules. A film starring your classic hero of the West.
Yeah, I've got these severed hands. I use them as a gag a lot,
The movie is Dirty Harry. Check it
When
out this
we
weekend.
first got Drew, she was this tiny little puppy in a little pink cage, and I would put these hands up on top of the cage, and she'd be pulling at it so hard, the hand would be going like this, and it was like a little, I think I've got some film of it, this little puppy, it looks like she's eating a human hand. These are just Halloween hands, and
And the note says, I expect 200,000
but it kind of
unmarked bills to
kinda
be
looks
delivered in a yellow duffel bag by
a little
midnight
real.
tonight, where I will kill again. Signed, Scorpio.
Only one man can take on the killer's ruthlessness.
Oh, this is a promo for Dirty Harry. I was wondering what the hell this is. Yeah,
The only difference between
Dirty Harry, what a great movie.
Callahan, I don't want another
My
incident
good
like the
friend
last time.
Tom, who passed away a few years ago, was so into Andy Robinson. That's all he would talk about. He would love the villains in movies. He was really into Alex and Clockwork Orange. He thought he was great. He loved the movie Caligula. He loved Dirty Harry, and he loved this character Scorpio that was based on the Zodiac Killer in San Francisco. Dirty Harry in the first movie has to take down this guy, Scorpio, who's the sniper that's just killing randomly. And he loved the performance that Andy Robinson gave in that movie because he's just so nuts. He's like the first, and my friend Tom is like, he loved, in Lost in Space, he loved Dr. Smith. I said, how could you love Dr. Smith? He was running the show. But no, he said, no, he was great because he didn't want to ever work and he was always complaining about his back. And it's like, he had a whole different way of looking at the world. He loved the bad guys in movies and TV shows. And later he met Andy Robinson. I'm not sure if he worked with him or not. He went out to Hollywood and worked in the film industry. But yeah, he befriended a lot of the actors that played bad guys, like Edwin Neal in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre played the hitchhiker. That was his. He was a movie poster dealer. That's what he did. I don't know if he's still alive or not, Edwin Neal, but he was out of Austin, and he dealt, and he was a big time movie poster dealer. Dealing in the high dollar movie they call it paper. The big deal movie collectors, so Edwin Neal. He played the crazy hitchhiker they picked up in the van that cut his hand, and from him, my friend bought the actual prop of the dead grandmother that they had seated at the table with them in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Yeah, and that was actually put on. That was put in the Bob Bullock, Texas History Museum for a brief while. He lent it to the museum because they're having an exhibit on Texas filmmaking, and regardless of what you might think of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it was one of the most profitable compared to what it cost movies ever, and it was a very well made movie, and it was a Texas made movie, so it's important historically for Texas filmmaking. So they had the dead grandmother and some other props. The props were all done by this one guy, I forget his name. All the bone sculptures and everything, and the chair with the dead grandmother in it. And then I guess Edwin Neal wound up with that grandmother, and then he sold it to my friend Tom. So somewhere I got a picture of myself with the dead grandmother. So I am just waiting to see what happens next with this great dark winter. It's been a lot of fun. I've been enjoying every bit of freezing and breathing in frigid cold air. And it looks like everything's kind of restored back to what it was. I got my Wi-Fi back, got heat, got light. I just need to be able to get in there and wash my hands and take a shower without, because right now, my wife said that someone was asking my wife, can you take the snow in your yard and let it melt and make it drinking water? And my wife said, no, I saw someone actually take a snowball, right? They packed in a snowball, and then they lit it on fire, and the snow burned. And they said there's horrible shit in the chemicals in the snow that comes, like in the rain and the snow that comes out of the sky. There's no telling what they're doing. Bill Gates had this plan that he would darken the sun to help with global warming. He was gonna put all this shit up in the atmosphere that make it a little darker for us. My fucking doctor, I was getting my checkup in June, and I said to him, do you think this is this whole thing that's happening to us, with the mask and everything, do you think it was man-made? And he said, no, it's just from, someone eating a bat or whatever. I'm thinking, oh boy, my doctor's not too smart. And I said, well, what do you think about these, I guess I asked him about Bill Gates and vaccines, and he said he said Bill Gates is perhaps the greatest global citizen that, he's a great person, and one of his biggest problems are people that don't want to take vaccines, and the doctor was telling me this, and I'm thinking, oh shit, maybe next time I come in for next year's physical, he maybe say, well, I won't treat you unless you've had that roll up your sleever. It's like, oh, I don't know that he would do that, but I'm thinking maybe I should get a doctor that's a little more skeptical of these crazy people. Billy Boy, that guy's a fucking crazy, someone that James Bond should deal with. What happened to the James Bond movie, man? That got went somehow swirled around the toilet bowl, just like this Black Widow movie that's and that Wonder Woman movie that was sitting on the shelf for 4 years. This new movie, I think James Bond's supposed to become a woman or something, or the 007 number is going to be taken up by a woman or something. But hold on. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So. Yeah. So what did you hear from the city? Okay. Let's suggest you get on that. Yeah. Get that done. Immediately. The vermin. Be careful, those icicles have been known to kill. Comic Crypt of Castle Hills just sent me a message at the top of my phone. I always thought, did I dream this, or is this in some comic book or some movie or some, I don't know where I got this idea. You know, like if O.J. Simpson had used an icicle, then there would be no murder weapon, right? Because it's like if you get someone with an icicle and then it melts, there's nothing to have your fingerprints on it. I always thought an icicle was the perfect weapon. Yeah, if you yeah, those icicles. I got some killer looking icicles outside the Gratu building that are like this long. They look like Excalibur. Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't want to sit underneath those icicles. They're sort of Damocles. Even with this helmet is not. This feels like it's made out of paper mache, man. These civil defense people, they didn't get the protection. Now this helmet. Shouldn't get all this dust on my father's helmet. This helmet feels like it gives your head some protection. Yeah, that doesn't feel like it's made out of paper mache. But hey guys, have you been drinking Vess? Now I understand that their profits have gone up 15% since we first took on Vess as a sponsor here on the Gratu Orlov channel. I think they're based out of Missouri, but Vess is the